Hello and welcome to Sunrise Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known as Crease Collector. So, starting things off for this episode, Aaron got a really sweet mail day out of the blue recently. So, Aaron, do you just want to share a little bit about that awesome surprise that you got?
Yes, I do. So pretty much just if you guys remember, I can't remember the exact episode right now, but you guys remember the amazing mail day that I got last year, and I received it from I guess my new hobby friend Blake out in Minnesota. He sent me a game used Enroth blocker and Enroth jersey just out of the blue, completely for free. And it was just unreal. And so the other day, I just had a package arrive and I had no idea who it was from or anything like that. I wasn't expecting anything. And turns out it was from Blake, just out of the blue. Once again, a random package had arrived for me and it was a smaller one. And so I knew it was cards. And I opened it up and, I'll keep this short, but it included three really neat cards. The first two was pretty common, but still, definitely very generous. The first two was a Be a Player rookie jersey from 09-10. And the next was from 2012-13 Panini Prime. One of the namesakes letters from his name, it was the letter O. And so those were numbered out of 75 and they were all autographed. And so just, I already completed the nameplate, but it's just something else to have is always really cool. And the third one, which was unreal, was again from 09-10. It was an Upper Deck Young Guns, but it was the high gloss version out of 10. So the 7 of 10 high gloss Young Gun for free. So not that they have the same value that they did back then, but that's not the point. The point was that, a card's so limited and quite desired as far as player collectors go, for him to send me one of those, for my collection totally for free is again, just another amazing moment in Blake and I's hobby friendship. And I've never really spoken to him at all. I gave my address once and that was it. It just he sent me, I think this is like my third or fourth random mail day from Blake from Minnesota, and so he's just surprised me out of the blue with random cards and pieces for my collection. And Blake, once again, thank you very much. I'm not sure if he listens to the podcast, but just thought I'd give him another shout out. Just again, another unbelievable act of hobby generosity.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, geez, like it doesn't matter what someone sends you if it's for free because the thought behind, their generosity is obviously, the thing that counts. But then when it's something like what Blake sends you, seemingly with somewhat of a regularity now at this point, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I think most people would say that a Young Gun High Gloss is certainly one of the big cards of any player from their rookie year. So, to get one of those, I know you already had one, but still, I mean, to get a second one, that's a big pickup for you for sure. So yeah, just amazing generosity from him yet again. It's kind of
Again.
funny. Yeah, again. We were theorizing before we started recording, like what's the backstory here? Like what, and who knows, like you said, you guys don't communicate, and that's not, because of you. You've obviously reached out and thanked him, every time he sends you something, but he, just goes about his business and does it. And obviously that's, well within his right and super cool. So yeah, I mean, obviously a very cool story yet again. And yeah, just always awesome when things like that happen. And I know that you were obviously surprised and very excited about those cards.
Yeah, it was awesome. Like I remember just opening it up, like just seeing his name on the package, like, oh man, another thing from Blake. Okay, this is weird. I wonder what it could be. And then just opening it up and seeing those great cards. And of course the high gloss Young Gun is like, whoa, like that's amazing. So just seeing that there was really cool. And yeah, just those cards from varying years just brought back a lot of memories for me. And of course the year of 09-10 is a very cool year for me. And like obviously, the year that started this whole collection. So yeah, just another reminder of that cool hobby year and another awesome card for the collection. So Blake, thanks so much.
No doubt. Very cool. So transitioning to our main topic for the episode, we weren't super sure what we wanted to do, and we were kind of just spitballing, thinking of some ideas, and came up with the idea of kind of doing like a mini countdown, so to speak. Obviously, at the end of each year that we've had the podcast, we've done a top 10 pickups for the year episode. So this is kind of a similar type of style, but it's not, related to recent pickups or anything like that. This one instead is going to be about cards that we have in our collection that we think are just underrated cards for whatever reason that might be. And obviously, we'll explain why we thought that. But each of us is just going to go through 5 cards that we have in our collections that, like I said, for whatever reason, we think are really underrated cards. Whether that be how we view them ourselves or just in terms of how the hobby as a whole views them. We just thought that would be an interesting topic and something a little bit different and fun for you guys to listen to, and just fun for us to go through some of those cards in our collection that we don't necessarily talk a lot about, certainly not with any regularity necessarily, but obviously still really cool cards, and in some regards really important cards nonetheless. So Aaron, I'll turn the floor over to you, and you can kick things off with your first underrated card.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a really fun episode, and I'm just going to start things off with a card that came out in 2017. I believe it was the start of 2017. The President's Choice stick handle card of Jonas Enroth, 1 of 1. And I just wanted to highlight this card because it's not underrated in my collection. It's probably one of my favorites. But the fact that this isn't underrated in this list is because it's by President's Choice Trading Cards. And I think that brand, hobby-wise, just doesn't get the recognition that it deserves. I know that there is a hardcore following of the brand and of the history of this brand. If you really want to take it back to the in the game days with you know Dr. Brian Price and his journey and his career through the hobby. But this was sort of a new undertaking that he had started, both in varying ways, both in name, of course, with President's Choice Trading Cards, but also in the model of that he wanted to bring collectors, these cards that he made. And so this project was, it turned out to be more than just a project, but this set was one of the first sets that introduced the hobby to this sort of direct to consumer model. And before I get into like a bunch of boring business terms, pretty much what this was like was that Mr. Price wanted to, have an inventory of cards that he had created and said, okay, well, they're here on my site, first come, first serve. And, you see all the cards available and you buy what you like and we'll ship it right to you. No opening packs or anything like that. No guessing of what cards are available. It's all right there. We're going to try and get more up. So keep checking the site. But you see a card you like, you buy it, and that's it. It seems pretty simple, but for a card company, that direct-to-consumer model is something different. We usually see it secondhand through platforms like eBay. Of course, you can browse the cards you want and pick them up and have them mailed to you. But seeing a trading card company do that for its entire inventory is something that we hadn't seen. And especially with, if you've been familiar with In the Game and now President's Choice, that the way Brian conducts business and the way he, wants to really put the collector first, and that really shines through his sets. And the stick handle sets was one of the ones that jumped out to me. And of course, the idea isn't new, having, the stick handle like of the player and their name produced on the card. But just the fact that Brian went really deep with that checklist and just all varying portions of, players, young, old, stuff like that from this decade to last decade. And it just really went, it was a very deep checklist. And I was thankful to, have a card from this set in my collection. So one, it's underrated because it's one of the ones where I've shown off probably the most, where, I've shown off such a cool card. And the concept is very familiar with collectors, but as soon as they see the design or President's Choice, they think like, what's that? And it's very, I think, underrated. And again, like if you've been familiar within the game over the years, it's a lot like that, because Brian is, the guy behind it all. And so President's Choice Trading Cards started up in, I want to say late 2016 or early 2016 or 2017. I hope I'm getting that right. I know that's a big range, but it was somewhere around there. Like I know there was rumors around, his new project, his new brand and company. And he went that direct to consumer way, and I thought that was so brilliant of him to do so across all his different sets that he had created. And so this was one that one is awesome, and two, it's just that model was so different. And I think therefore just President's Choice Trading Cards just a little bit underrated. But I think if you've been familiar with their cards, whether had been already through your collection or maybe after this podcast, I think you'll come to know very quickly how much of a big player they are and how much great cards they create in this hobby.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously, I'm a big supporter of President's Choice. Anyone that has listened to the podcast for any length of time knows that. But yeah, it's cool that you mentioned that Enroth stick handle card. Like you said, I always thought that the stick nameplate cards were really cool, but never really had a huge appreciation for them since I had never owned one. But then I don't know how long ago, probably about a year, well, maybe a little under a year ago, probably last spring or summer, I actually ended up picking up the Michel Goulet stick handle from Dr. Price. So yeah, once I got that in hand, my appreciation for those cards definitely grew, and they're just beautiful cards in person. And like Aaron said, the checklist is so extensive, and part of that is because Dr. Price continues to make them. So, for example, your Enroth card, that's back from 2017 or so, whereas this Goulet was made in 2020. Same design, same concept, everything. Not that it's necessarily a set per se, because it's not, from a specific product from a specific year or anything, but it's one of those quote unquote like living sets where it just keeps getting added to, keeps growing, different players, and some guys even have multiple different versions of the card and everything. So yeah, definitely really cool cards. I really like the design on them. It's just really simple, clean, straightforward, really, highlights that stick piece for sure. So definitely a good choice for you. And, obviously, like you said, mentioning President's Choice as a whole, definitely at the very least an underappreciated brand for sure. So definitely a good start there. For my number 5, I had a little bit of debate here about what I wanted to go with. I thought about a few different options, but what I ended up settling on is something that it's kind of a little bit of a cop out just because it's, part of my Jalmerson collection. We kind of wanted to stay away from our main PCs, just so that, we were giving you guys a little bit something different than just a ton of Jalmerson and Enroth stuff. But just because of what this card is, I thought it, deserved a spot on the list. So my number 5, and this is more so just because of the set and the concept of the card, but it's Nicholas Jalmerson's Panini Dominion Engravatures card, numbered out of 15. And for me, what really does it for these cards is just the concept of the card. To the best of my knowledge, these engravature cards, not from this specific set and year, but just the engravatures cards as a whole, were, I believe, the first cards that really, replicated a player's name on the Stanley Cup using real silver embedded into the card. So, just a really cool concept that obviously, is very much a hockey specific type of thing. And, is a very cool, different, innovative idea that Panini had. So just for me, the fact that Jalmerson does have a card in that set, like I said, they were made for what, 4 years or so, every year in Dominion. And they would do them for, that current season's cup winners. And then, they also did some of just like legends in the game and stuff. So yeah, just the fact that he has one is really cool. And then obviously for me personally, the story behind getting it, obviously kind of adds another layer to just the significance of it in my collection, having been arguably my top Jalmerson want for a number of years before I got it back in the fall of 2020. So Yeah, that's my number five. Just a really cool and innovative card that I think because it was produced by Panini, maybe at this point in time is a little bit underrated just because people gravitate more toward upper deck cards nowadays, understandably so. And speaking of which, that's kind of a theme that kind of runs throughout my five cards. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think the engravitures cards, just because of the innovation, and maybe how they aren't as valuable as they could or should be nowadays, definitely I think was a deserving card on my list.
I think we're going to see some similarities as far as Panini goes in my next card that I talk about here. So when you talked about, kind of staying away from our main PC guys, I kind of failed at that. So my second card, and that Panini card that you mentioned is amazing, by the way. Like I remember when you got that, just cheering you on the whole way. Amazing card and from an amazing set. It's definitely one that jumps out at you, and especially it was made with like real silver. That's like kind of cool. This one, I guess, kind of is similar in more than one way. That one has some silver in it. This one has a little bit of diamond in it. So really, these are like the bling bling editions. So my next card that I'm going to highlight as an underrated card it's a really great card. It's kind of includes two, but I guess we're going to talk about one set. It's from 2013-14 Panini National Treasures. And that product included the Flawless set. And the Flawless cards, a lot of people are familiar with them now with the huge boom in the hobby. And I've seen other sports get, the recognition that these Flawless cards deserve, I think. But for hockey, I think a lot of people would be kind of, a lot of raised eyebrows when talking about the Flawless set in hockey, because I think some people might not even know that they exist. They were such a small part of National Treasures. And, I think they deserve a little bit of highlighting in this podcast. So, for my collection, I do have the out of 5 and the 1-of-1 version. And the Flawless cards, I think they're just have a lot in common. They're very bold and just a lot of white involved, and just they almost look like something royally awesome. Like that's probably the best way I can describe it. Just another level with these cards. They look really cool, and I just think a lot of people, again, because Panini's time in the hobby was so short, I'm not sure if we'll see them back again as far as cards go, but it was one of their last releases for hockey. I want to say their very last one. And they came out with these Flawless cards that, again, have been big players in, baseball, soccer. I want to say basketball and football as well, but I could be wrong. But like Flawless is everywhere, and you've seen a bunch of amazing Flawless cards in all the other big major sports. And so some people would be kind of surprised to know that they were around for hockey, albeit for a very short amount of time. But like I would definitely want to highlight this set just in case you are wondering, are there any cards that I can get today, as far as hockey goes? And, the answer is yes. They are very limited, both in print run and because it was only that one main set. But if you can find a card now, of one of your favorite players or favorite teams from one of the 2013-14 National Treasures product, I would definitely consider, trying to pick one up, because they're really great cards and they signify a very interesting part of this hobby's past, and one that I think I'm a little bit nostalgic over a little bit, and these cards are kind of like a signal to that. And I think they deserve a little bit of recognition, because not that Flawless is not recognized, but just for, I guess in this more sport specific example, I think like it's more of like a what could have been, I guess, if that license continued. So this was like a nice little tribute to that. So I figured I'd mention it.
Yeah, no, those are definitely important cards in the sports card hobby as a whole. Like you said, it's, a card that collectors of other sports know and love. And the fact that they did exist in hockey, like you said, for only 1 year and extremely limited, definitely, I would agree for sure. That's a very underrated set, without a doubt, especially given, like we said, the significance of those cards in other sports. So yeah, definitely agree with that one being on your list for sure. Moving on to my number four. This is a card that you guys have seen a couple times recently, actually. A card that, I personally love. I mean, this has probably become one of my favorite cards in my collection. And that's honestly purely because of the looks. That being the Marc Andre Fleury 2003-04 Topps Pristine Gold Refractor, numbered out of 33.
So awesome.
Yeah, that's a beautiful card. And why I have this on my list is, again, it kind of goes back to that idea of it's not an upper deck card. In my opinion, this is probably a top three, rookie year parallel for Flurry that does not have an autograph on it. There are obviously plenty of autograph cards of him from that year that, are probably bigger, more valuable cards than this. But just looking at the non-signed stuff, I mean, I would say that there's the Young Gun High Gloss. In my opinion, those are like one and two, probably the Young Gun High Gloss being one and then this being two. And then I was thinking, what outside of those two even compares to those? I thought about the Upper Deck Ice Glass Parallel, which also kind of an underrated card that not a lot of people even know those exist because it was a one-off. But these are just very, very beautiful cards. Especially something I think about too is, this was almost kind of like in modern terms, kind of like an OPG Platinum or something. Whereas if this card came out today in OPG Platinum, and of a huge name goalie rookie, it would be a huge deal. And maybe say this is the equivalent of like a Emerald Surge or an Orange Checkers or something like that. But still, I mean, I would say this product and specifically these gold refractors are one of, if not, honestly, in my opinion, like the nicest looking parallel cards ever made in hockey. So, I just think that honestly, not a lot of people know about them because they're from so long ago and because it's from Topps and Topps Pristine, which was a one-off product in hockey. Similar concept to your last one. It was a product that had been done for multiple years in other sports, but Topps only did it the 1 year for hockey, the last year that they had a license. So yeah, I mean, just a very, very beautiful card. And I think a card that if it existed today would be a lot bigger of a card. And, I think even just in the context of, since it was not an upper deck card at the time, that factor carries over still to today, where it's just kind of an overlooked card because people would prefer to be going after the Young Gun and the Future Watch Auto and, stuff like that. So, I was thinking about it and kind of researching a little bit today, but this card is probably worth like $250 US, somewhere around there, 250, 300. And in my opinion, if this was an upper deck produced card, you'd probably be talking seriously like $1,000, if not more, just because of how rare and how beautiful the card is. And just the fact that it's a super shiny card, refractor, all that, which is really hot right now. Combine all those things, and I think this would be a four-figure card for sure in the hobby. If it was, like I said, like a top rookie today. So unquestionably, to me, a card that belongs on this list for sure. And keep in mind the Topps Pristine brand, because we'll be coming back to that a little bit later in the show.
I think we're getting older because, we keep mentioning cards that was like a one-off, they don't exist anymore, what could have been, how if they were around today, stuff like that. I think I see a trend, unfortunately. Okay. So my next one, this one's going to be really short. I've kind of run into it a couple of times where people, I guess, are surprised that I own this card. It's nothing super crazy, but it just doesn't fit what I normally collect. I mean, I collect goalies, so I guess it does fit, but just ones that, I mean, it seems almost like too high end for what my collection is. It's a upper deck ultimate collection patch auto, or dual patch auto, I guess you could say, of Patrick Waugh from 07-08. And it's numbered of 10. It's the first one made. And it was just a card that I got at a really great deal. And I was just like, yeah, I'll pick that up. Why not? And then it's kind of floated along silently in my collection. And every time I show it off, especially now with the big hobby boom, it's kind of like one of those ones where, yeah, the newer stuff's cool, but some of those other Upper Deck sets, those legends that didn't appear as much are just like getting some really heavy dollars pointed their way. And so this is one that I've been asked about multiple times. And it's just one that, I have no interest in selling. It wasn't the reason why I picked up the card, but it's one of those ones where, I kind of know the lane of collecting I'm in. And it's not so much that high end stuff, but this is one of those cards where it's like, wait, whoa, like this guy has that card. It's just one of those ones for me, I think, that stick out, in my eyes, I guess, that it's something that, not that it doesn't deserve to be there, but it's one of those ones that, I don't know, it just seems a little bit too high end for me, but I'll take it if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a very nice card. Like you said, I actually am really partial to those, late 2000s Ultimate Collection products. I thought those products were just really cool. I feel like honestly, it's kind of one of the first like annual higher end sets that wasn't the cup, if that makes sense. Like I remember, going back to like the early days of breaking on YouTube, like that was always a product that I really enjoyed watching was Ultimate Collection, regardless of the year. But I remember watching 07, 08 Ultimate Collection breaks, when that product came out. So yeah, definitely a really cool card for sure. And I mean, how can you go wrong with Patrick Waugh, right? So
Right. I mean, I guess that one would be just underrated in the fact that, it's one that I own, and I guess it wasn't, I guess, expected. So like underrated in that respect. That again, if that makes any sense.
yeah, no doubt for sure. So for my number three, and again, we're like I said, I'm kind of continuing the trend of not upper deck cards. Not that I have anything against upper deck, obviously, but just I think that, with upper deck having had a license for over 30 years, the natural, gravitation for most collectors is to, be focusing more on upper deck stuff. And that makes perfect sense. So that's kind of why I'm going with stuff that's a little bit off the board, kind of forgotten cards, things like that. So for my number three, this is a card that, I know when Aaron sees, he'll be like, oh yeah, like of course. It's a card that maybe on its own I haven't talked a whole lot about, but I've definitely talked about the set quite a bit, both on and off the podcast. That being, it's from 2003-04, fittingly, of course, for me, right? In the game used signature series from the triple memorabilia insert set, which again, you guys know I love that set. And the one I picked is the Bobby Orr card, which is Jersey Skate and Stick, and it's numbered out of 20. And why this card is on my list, you might say, yeah, that's a really cool card. It's from, one of your favorite sets, whatever, what's overly special about it? Well, the reason why I picked this one is because actually licensed Bobby Orr memorabilia is actually fairly hard to find. And the reason for that is because Orr himself is actually not a big proponent of game used memorabilia cards. So you will have a fairly difficult time finding licensed Bobby Orr memorabilia cards. Now, of course, over the last 7, 8 years since Leaf came around, they have made a lot of Bobby Orr memorabilia cards. And, that's great because people can get that Bobby Orr memorabilia for their collection. It's a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier to find. That's awesome. But you'd be surprised how big of a demand there is and how valuable some of Orr's licensed memorabilia cards are. For context, there has not been a licensed Orr memorabilia card since 2006-07. There's only one card made that year. Before that, you have to go back to 03-04, being this year. And that year was exclusively in the game cards. You'd have to go back even further for there to be an upper deck Bobby Orr game used memorabilia card. So, just the fact that there really are not that many Orr memorabilia cards. There were, in the early days, there were quite a few stick cards of his that weren't necessarily overly rare. Some of them weren't even serial numbered at all, but so those might be a little bit easier to find. But yeah, anything that has jersey or skate is typically pretty difficult to find, on a licensed card. So, the fact that this is obviously a licensed or memorabilia card is notable in and of itself. But then also the fact that it does have jersey, skate, and stick all on the same card is notable because, to the best of my knowledge, as I was doing some research earlier today, there are only four other licensed or memorabilia cards that have three different memorabilia types. So you'll see cards that have, a jersey and a stick, but seeing jersey, skate, and stick all in the same card, there's only four other cards out there that have that. One of those is the gold version of this card, number out of 10. And then the other three cards are all from 0304 Be a Player Ultimate Memorabilia, one of which is numbered out of 10, and the other two are both numbered out of 4. So finding a triple memorabilia card of ore is extremely, extremely rare. You just do not see them. So I think just the significance of that, and then of course, pair it with the iconic design, in my opinion, from this set, just makes it an extremely underrated card for sure. So I'll give my good buddy Josh Packham a shout out. We were talking about this card over the weekend, and I was saying, in my opinion, this is probably one of the more underrated cards in the hobby, in my opinion, just because of the things that I said. And that's kind of what fueled the idea for this podcast. So obviously a really, really nice card, and just kind of the significance and the scarcity factor behind it. I figured, that this was definitely something worthy of being considered underrated, just because it is somewhat attainable. Those other four cards I mentioned, all being out of 10 or less, are probably nearly impossible to find at this point in time. This one too, but at least being out of 20, it's at least, feasible that you might find one. So that's my number 3.
Very nice. I mean, and very specific too. For the I guess the scarcity of his memorabilia, I could be wrong on this, but didn't Upper Deck have some pieces of his, but because they wanted to, and I think rightfully so, preserve their business relationship with him as far as autographs and stuff like that, they just said, you know what, we'll take his autographs and that relationship, and extend it for the future in response to his need to keep the memorabilia off his cards. So I think Upper Deck made a smart move there and not tarnishing that relationship by permanently holding off producing memorabilia cards of ore. So I think other companies have stepped in to fill that void. But I mean, it's getting harder. Like, I can't remember the exact price, but the last time a Bobby Orr gamer came up for sale, it was just, the price was unreal. Like, and so you're not going to find it anywhere. And of course, with there being so few producers of cards as far as licensed stuff goes, you got to really look in the past, and find some cards. But again, like Eric, you alluded to, that they're very hard to find, and especially with a 3-piece like you have there, it's very, very tough. But it's very interesting, clawing back through the history of the hobby and seeing cards like that, and why they're not around today, both because it's very scarce to find that stuff, and also because other business relationships at play. So very, very cool. My next card is similar. Like, I like how our lists are kind of meshing together really nicely, even though we didn't plan for this at all. We just sort of threw together our list of 5, and away we go. But my next card is 2008, 2009 In the Game Ultimate Memorabilia Complete Package out of 9 of Jacques Plante. So this card was a random card that I picked up for my collection in 2019 at the expo, and it is a complete package card. And for those who don't know what those are, they do include, like Eric's last card that he mentioned, multiple pieces of memorabilia. So this one is really, really cool. It includes pieces of his glove, his pad, skate, and of course his jersey. And so this one, similar to my first mention with the President's Choice card, this one is done by In the Game, of course. And that, it's kind of weird wondering what this would be if this was, an Upper Deck card or something like that. I know that's not their lane most of the time, and that's fine, but it kind of makes you wonder if cards like these got, I guess, the full attention of the hobby in, a flagship set or something like that. But alas, it's the way it goes. And cards like these are kind of in these niche products like we used to see with in the game Ultimate Memorabilia. So, these cards make you wonder, but I think for good reason. It kind of keeps the prices down on some of these. Not all of them. I mean, in the game cards can get very pricey, of course. There's a very hardcore following, but cards like these I think are underrated because it reminds me of the past in the game sets and what they try to do now with Leaf. But I think that, there's something to be said for the old in the game sets. And a card like this just speaks to that. They've done many reiterations of the complete package cards and over the years. And just something like this, again, it really makes you wonder if this was a different card manufacturer, what would the ceiling be on these cards? But similar to President's Choice, within the game cards, I think some of the sets are a little bit underrated. And this would be one that would be one for me. The vintage memorabilia is top notch. And of course, having multiple pieces, very hard to get. And, you just don't see these things made too often. So underrated set just because of, the memorabilia involved and just because of how little attention I still think they receive, unfortunately.
Yeah, I love the complete package cards. I think it was
Right.
just like a really great idea that Dr. Price had, obviously, and of course, you think about it, it's not like the most unique idea or anything, but just the fact that you can get, multiple different pieces of memorabilia from the same player all on the same card. They're just really special cards, especially those complete package cards were always kind of known for having four different materials. Two is one thing, three is another, but four, like that's really cool. So, and of course, over the years, they were made of many different players from different eras and everything. But yeah, obviously, if you can do that with, an old school legend of the game like Jacques Pont, that's a pretty amazing piece of history for sure. So yeah, I definitely appreciate those cards for sure. And for my number two, don't hate me too much, but I'm going to continue this same concept again.
That's fine
Um,
with me.
they warrant spots on the list, for good reason. So that's why they're on our list. But my number two, and it's extremely similar to the last one, not exactly the same, but it's very similar. This one is also a triple memorabilia card using that same design as the Bobby Orr that I just mentioned. This one instead comes from the 2005-06 in the game Sidney Crosby series, his triple memorabilia card from that set, which is numbered out of 87. And the reason for this one is because this was actually the first product that featured multi memorabilia cards for Crosby. Now, before that, he did have, another thing kind of similar to that complete package and to these in the game did do complete jersey cards, which featured, something like a jersey piece, a logo piece, a number piece, a nameplate piece, things like that. And I think there was a Crosby complete jersey, I believe in 0405 Heroes and Prospects. So that would have been his first like multi-piece card. But in terms of multiple memorabilia types all on the same card, Crosby's first ever cards in that regard came out of this Sidney Crosby series that came out in 2005-06 and was actually produced in 2005. So, that one specifically out of those cards, is obviously just very exciting. And, of course, I love the design, as you guys are, obviously very familiar with. But, I think just the significance of that product having the first ever multiple, memorabilia type cards of Crosby is significant, let alone having three. I believe there were, I want to say, four other cards in that set that just had two different memorabilia types. So like jersey and stick or jersey and glove or, whatever it might be. So, the fact that all three were on the same card and then again, put it on that iconic design, just an extremely underrated card and one that I'm certainly glad to have in my collection. And at the time that I got it, I didn't even know that, historical component. I just wanted it because it was the design. So, the fact that I can tie it back to, it being a historical card for Crosby too, obviously is really cool. And with there being 87 of them out there, is an attainable card. So I would say, that's certainly something deserving of the underrated title. I kind of try to stay away from stuff that's super, super, super rare just because, how can like a one of one, for example, be underrated? Though Aaron actually, did a very good job of explaining with his specific out of five and out of one with the fall. It's just because of the concept of the set and what it actually meant to the hobby. So I think that definitely fit. But yeah, I think, just the fact of what this is, from a historical standpoint, and honestly, I think a lot of people probably don't even know that these cards exist and that product even existed. So, I think it's definitely a very, very underrated card for sure.
I like how we mentioned a couple different areas of underratedness, whether it be the player, in their memorabilia situation, the brand, the set. I think we touched on a lot of underrated concepts and why these sets or why these cards in specific deserve a mention here and how there should be more attention on them. And so that's really cool. Hopefully people aren't coming to this episode and thinking this is like, an investor type episode where we list off a bunch of cards that are underrated and they're going to spike next month or something like that. Not really what we were going for, but hey, that's okay. And so my next one's going to raise some eyebrows. So this one is the long-haired parallel, I guess you want to call it, of the 1981-1982 Red Rooster set for Wayne Gretzky. Now, if you're wondering, what did you just say? I don't blame you at all, because it's a really weird, awkward set that not a lot of people know exist, or they don't really know the card in particular exists. And I think this probably could be said for a lot of 80s or 90s sets. There's a lot of weird stories of weird card sets, being created and why that was. But this one, I think, takes the cake. I'm not like a vintage expert, but I think this one is very interesting. And so just a little background on this one card in particular. The Red Rooster, I guess, brand was a set of convenience stores. I believe they were in Edmonton, but they could have been across Alberta. Try not to fact check me too much on that, but I think they were just in that area. And so the Red Rooster convenience stores had a promotional set, a yearly promotional set with the Edmonton Oilers. And so what they did was create a couple card sets of the Oilers and just very simple cards, just headshots of the players with a little description on the front and just something on the back. And it was just simply a means of celebrating the team. And of course, like all cards were back then, a little bit of advertisement as well, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. That's, how the whole hobby started to begin with. So I don't have a problem with that. And so why I mentioned, the long-haired version, I mean, like what does that mean? Especially with cards. Well, there was a set, and it was the 81-82 year. They did this for a couple years. I want to say 3 or 4. But anyway, I think this was the first year they did them, first or second year. And so the marketing manager of the Red Rooster brand recalled this story, and it was with Wayne Gretzky. And when they were taking headshots of the team to be used in this promotional card set, Wayne Gretzky was photographed like everyone else. And like a lot of people from that time period, had just this long and unkept mess of hair. And I think a lot of us, I know I can sympathize and identify with Wayne Gretzky a little bit here, with that long, shaggy mess of hair. Like, I know that I can. And so when those cards were made and proofed and ready to go, Wayne Gretzky's side of things just didn't like the headshot used of Wayne. I think a lot of people can kind of go back in the years and kind of sum up Wayne Gretzky as, a very clean, classy icon for hockey, and his side, his agent and everybody wanted to keep it that way and sort of craft his image going forward with his NHL career. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. And so this kind of ratty looking headshot of Wayne Gretzky was not the image that they were going for. And so Wayne Gretzky had ultimately approached them in return. He approached the marketing manager saying, not forcefully at all, but just saying, hey, are you going to use that photo? Do you mind if we take another one? And so they brought Wayne back another day, for a nice, clean looking headshot. And so I have the short haired version, and they do actually categorize these cards differently. You have the long haired parallel, I guess you could say, and the short haired version. So the short haired version was the mass produced version. And the long haired one was, some were printed and they were never mass distributed, but a couple of them were kept, a couple sheets. And eventually through the years, they made their way out, onto the secondary market. And so they're very underrated. And I know with a lot of Gretzky or vintage collectors, whenever you share the story about that long haired version, a lot of them are like, oh man, like I remember that one. I got to get me one, because rumor has it, I want to say there were only 1,000 or so. But a lot of people, even vintage cards people, just may not even know that they exist. And so it's underrated for the reason that just a weird set that a lot of people might not know were a thing. So if you want to do yourself a favor and Google, the 81-82 Red Rooster card of Wayne Gretzky, you'll probably find an image of some long-looking, party-hard-looking Gretzky. It's a funny image, and it's definitely something that is very, very, like, I think it's a great story for a card, and I just had to pick up the short-haired version, like just to, have some small piece of that weird little story. And so definitely an underrated card. I know for Gretzky fans, and I think for vintage people too. I think if you're a vintage card fan, that one is definitely worth checking out. Or if you're just a card fan in general. Like, I don't collect Wayne Gretzky in particular, but this card was one where as soon as I heard about it and read about the story, I was like, oh man, I gotta get me one. Like, it's a cool little promotional card. They're a little bit bigger than regular cards, but I think it'll fit your collection nicely. They're not too expensive either. So it's one that really is attainable, and it's one that I feel is really underrated, but a nice little addition in my collection. So hopefully it can be a nice addition in yours as well. So just a fun little story to kind of end things off for me in my underrated, or I guess unknown, card list. So yep, that was my number one choice.
I mean, how often can you say that a Wayne Gretzky card is underrated, right?
It's true, but this one I think
Oh,
does it.
yeah, it absolutely is. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's cool that a player that you think it's not even possible for a card of them to be underrated, then you think about it and you're like, yeah, that actually is extremely underrated, is really cool. So yeah, definitely a great example for sure. So, and obviously the story behind it too is really cool and unique as well. So yeah, definitely deserving of the top spot for you. My top underrated card in my collection, this was not even on my radar when I had the idea of this episode. And then I was just kind of going through, some pictures of cards that I have saved on my phone. And I came across this one, and, I was just like, oh, that's a nice card. I wonder if there's any kind of significance behind it, and when I saw the card, I was like, oh, like, I don't think so, but I'm kind of just curious to see what I can find about it. So I started looking into it and quickly discovered that it actually is a pretty significant card in a historical sense. And this is a card too that I don't know if I've ever mentioned on the podcast before. So you guys might not even know that I have this card. Aaron, I don't even know if you know that I have this card. So, kind of cool in that regard too. That being a 2012-2013 in the game draft prospects card. And they did this product for a few years, kind of a little bit of an oddball type of product just because it focused exclusively on prospects and it wasn't widely available. It was to some extent, but it wasn't, mass produced. So again, this is probably a product that some people don't even know exists either, even though it was done for, I think, 3 years. But anyway, being, I believe from the first year they did the product, 2012-13, draft prospects autograph of the one and only Connor McDavid. And what's interesting about this card is these cards, there's this one, and then there's also a second version of this card where McDavid is wearing a white jersey. And then these are the silver ones. And then there are gold versions with a print run of 20 of both of those cards as well. So the two different versions with the silver and gold, these cards were the first ever McDavid autograph cards that were hard signed. He had had autograph cards before, but they were sticker autographs. So these were actually the first ever hard signed McDavid autograph cards. And I did not know that prior to today. So I learned something new today about something in my collection that I've had for a number of years at this point. But I mean, how cool is that to know that this is, actually a fairly notable card just because, I know people like chasing after the first, whatever of whatever player it might be. So yeah, just learning that this was McDavid's first ever hard signed autograph card was pretty cool. And I thought that was notable. And, like I said, something I didn't know. So I'm assuming a lot of other people probably don't know that as well. So yeah, just a really cool card. And, with it being, obviously well before his NHL days, I think it's probably just a card that people don't know it exists, or at the very least, isn't on their radar. And therefore, I would say is, an extremely underrated card for sure. So just a really unique card in that sense. And when I learned that, obviously, immediately knew that it had to be on my list for sure. And as it turns out, ended up being my number one pick on the list. So just a really cool card. And yeah, the story behind it obviously is really sweet too.
That's awesome. Like I personally didn't know that that was his first hard signed autograph. This actually reminds me, like kind of like an honorable mention. I don't own this card, nor do I own that one. But like this reminds me of the 1999, I want to say, Be a Player autographs of Wayne Gretzky. And they were the first, I want to say it was 99, but they were the first hard signed cards or just pack inserted autograph cards in general of Wayne Gretzky. And that was the 99 Be a Player autographs. I believe he was wearing, the All-Star jersey, or maybe it was a promotional jersey or something like that. But yeah, like that set was, for him, it was the first autograph card put in packs. And so that is a really cool, I guess, first for him. And with this McDavid, again, it just being the first of anything in the hobby is really cool. And hearing that, like that's his first hard signed card is pretty significant, actually. Like that's really cool. And especially with, being pictured with his junior days is really cool. I know for some collectors as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good point. You mentioned the Gretzky. They're actually older than that. Those promotional jersey autograph cards that you mentioned. Those are from 94, 95 actually. So a lot older than that. But yeah, I mean that was the first ever product that had, a kind of a intentional, we're putting autograph cards in this product. There were some cards in the early 90s where, there was like a chase card that was signed, or like they had a redemption program or something for an autograph card. But having a product focused around autograph cards, that 94 95 Be a Player product was the first. And obviously, like you said, that Gretzky is the crown jewel of that product for sure. And here we are again. That's probably an underrated Gretzky card, right? So yeah, cool that you note that for sure.
That's so cool. Yeah. I just looked it up now. Yep, it was 94, 95 Be a Player autograph number 108 Wayne Gretzky. So that was the card I mentioned. That was his first pack inserted autographs. And they were, of course, back then, sticker autographs weren't really a thing. So it was, of course, hard signed. So yeah, like a bunch of first here. So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Like I don't know how you found that out, but that's really neat.
Yeah, I was kind of just like, as I was flipping through my phone, like I said, seeing a card that I thought, oh, I wonder if there's any significance behind that. And it ended up being, some of the information I shared about like the Crosby and the Orr and stuff, kind of just going on Beckett, looking through their checklists and kind of figuring out what the historical component of it was, and like I said, these aren't McDavid's first autograph cards. He did have a few different autographs available in 12-13 Heroes and Prospects, but every single one of those was a sticker autograph. So those would have came out, I believe, in like probably early 2013, somewhere right around there, like probably this time of year during the 12-13 season. And these the draft prospects products always came out, I think like late spring or something, kind of like leading up to the draft, which makes sense. So while this isn't his first ever autograph card, it was, like I said, the first on card autograph card for him. And, really that's kind of something that in the game, especially as time progressed into this kind of, early 2010s era, almost exclusively use sticker autographs for their autograph cards. Obviously there were, like you alluded to, actually the original Be a Player Ultimate Memorabilia set, those were all hard signed autographs. I think that was 2001 Ultimate Memorabilia first edition. Those were all hard signed. But as the years progressed, in the game really did transition into almost exclusively sticker autographs. So I believe this draft prospects product was one of the few that every single year they made it was hard signed autographs. And of course, at that point in time with these players being prospects, it was probably easier to get those guys to sign, on card autographs, as opposed to NHL players who are way busier and, are signing way more stuff and things like that. So, and I believe, I'm not 110% sure, but I know at least one of the years that they did this product, the silver autographs were numbered out of 200, or it had a print run of 200. None of the cards are actually serial numbered, but just had a print run of 200. So I would assume that if this card does not have a print run of 200, it's probably right around that same number, give or take a little bit. So even just that fact too, it's a fairly scarce card, and people might not realize that. So yeah, just, cool to kind of dig through some cards that we had and, figure out some different, historical components and things like that. And, kind of one thing that I was kind of thinking of while I was coming up with my list, at least, is I wanted to show cards that, you guys might not realize the significance behind it, or, the value behind the card. And like Aaron said, not that this is about the financial component of it, but, you might see a card like this McDavid and say, wow, that's actually a pretty cool card given the significance of it being his first on card autograph. I want to go out and get one of those. I want to find one. I want to have that in my collection. So, whether that be something like this, or, the Crosby or Fleury, or, an engravature's card, or, one of the flawless cards, something like that. We kind of wanted to give you guys a variety of cards that maybe you're not aware of, maybe you're not aware of the significance behind them, and, have it be something that you guys can relate to and resonate with. And, maybe you guys do end up going out and picking up one of the cards that we mentioned. So just wanted to do a little bit of a different topic and a different change of pace here. And hopefully, I would at least like to do things like this, with some regularity moving forward. Maybe once or twice a year, we kind of do something like this and just change it up a little bit. Obviously gives us an opportunity to show off some cards that maybe you guys don't know we have, cards that we don't show off or talk about all that often. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was really enjoyable just kind of doing some homework on these cards and being able to share that with you guys for sure. So yeah, I think that's all I have as far as the main topic of the episode. Is there anything else that you'd want to add about underrated cards in general, or any of the things that we shared about, Aaron?
No, it's just been fun kind of recapping all these cool cards and finding out a little bit more about them. So hopefully we inspired you to maybe look some of these up and maybe even make a deal for one for your own collection. So I think that'd be really, really neat. And if you have any cool stories, or even if like you know of any underrated cards yourself, definitely let us know, because we love hearing about that stuff. And you would even in turn educate us. And that's really cool too. So always a fan of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, these are just underrated cards that we have. Obviously, there are plenty of other underrated cards that we do not have, such as that Gretzky autograph card that Aaron mentioned. So, just wanted to highlight things that we have. But yeah, we would love to hear, your stories too, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it might be, email, forums, whatever. We want to hear your stories too, because I'm sure you guys have stories that are every bit as cool as these ones too. So, obviously there's a lot of really cool cards out there with great stories behind them and different ways that make them significant. So we would love to hear that. One other thing that I just wanted to add about this McDavid card that I remembered, it's honestly really creepy if you think about it. But look at this card and compare it to his Young Guns card. The photo is almost identical. It's obviously not. It's not like it's photoshopped. They're both real game action photos, but they're almost identical. It's very strange. So yeah, I've always kind of been like, that's really weird, especially because at one point I had this displayed right next to a McDavid Young Guns. So it was always just like, that is the strangest thing, that these photos were taken, 3 or 4 years apart, but it looks almost exactly the same. So just another little weird quirk of that card, but just figured I'd mention it. So yeah, obviously now you guys, you probably know what the McDavid photo looks like on the Young Gun and everything, but yeah, it's remarkable how nearly identical the photos are on these two cards. But figured I'd throw that in there as a fun little added bonus. But I think that'll wrap it up for that component of the episode being the main part. And then one last thing I just wanted to touch on really quick. Every now and then we kind of like talking about things that are coming in the future for episodes of the podcast. And I did want to just quickly mention one episode that will be coming up at some point. Not super sure when that might be. Hopefully sometime, in the relatively near future. At worst, I would say probably in the next couple months. But one product that I have always, been really interested in and just thought was really cool, and this goes back to earlier in the episode, I said, remember this, we'll talk about it later, that being 2003-04 Topps Pristine. And, I just think, like I said, when I was talking about the Flurry, just spectacularly looking, just beautiful cards. Topps did a phenomenal job with every card in that product, just looking amazing. Especially even just the base cards, like just beautiful cards. If you guys don't have any Topps Pristine cards in your collection, just go on ComC or eBay or something and just buy a cheap one, because they're just beautiful cards. It doesn't have to be anything overly expensive or rare or anything, but just go grab something, even if it's just a base card. They're beautiful cards. But anyway, with that in mind, I had always kind of, said, if it ever made sense and if the opportunity ever presented itself, I would love to open a box of 0304 Topps Pristine. And over the last couple of years since we started the podcast, I've actually attempted to do that. There's been a box listed on eBay here and there. I think there's been 2 or 3 listed over the last couple of years. And I made plays on each of them that was listed, and it just never worked out. They ended up selling for a lot more than I thought they would, and it just didn't make financial sense at that point to do it. So I kind of just said, well, maybe one day it'll work out. Well, that day has arrived. I was able to find somebody on Facebook that had some Topps Pristine boxes available, and I was able to get them. So stay tuned for that. I don't have the boxes in hand, and in fact, I mentioned him earlier in the show, but my good buddy Josh Packham, the deal would not have happened without him. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. The seller was only willing to sell the boxes in person. So I actually sent Josh the money, and then he went to the bank, got cash, and did the deal in person with the guy. So he has the boxes at his house right now, and he'll eventually send them down to me. And, then at some point here, I'll open up a box on the show. So yeah, just super excited about that. I don't want to spoil too much and, ramble too much about the product, but it's a really unique and exciting product. Just how they configured the product too. It's very unique, and like I said, obviously the cards are just absolutely stunning. So I am very excited about that. I know that'll be a pretty fun episode, and it'll probably end up being a live stream episode as well, just so that you guys can kind of experience that box breaking, experience yourself as well. And one reason with that too is good luck finding a box break video of 0304 Topps Pristine hockey. You will not find one. So you can scour YouTube, scour the internet. You're not going to find a box break video of 0304 Topps Pristine because they're not out there. So the fact that I'll be able to do that and, be able to put that out on YouTube and stuff too is going to be really fun. So just to, kind of document that aspect of the product and things like that. So yeah, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a preview for a future episode, and one that I am very, very excited about. I know it's a little bit of a different thing. We're not super big on box breaks. We do every now and again, and typically it's newer stuff that's just coming out. But a product like this is just an iconic product in my opinion, and having had the opportunity to get a box, is just amazing. So something I'm definitely extremely excited about and looking forward to, and just wanted to give you guys the heads up on that, to be looking out for that. Once the time comes closer, we'll post updates about when that will be, since it will be a live break that will probably end up streaming live on Facebook. So definitely keep an eye out for that, and we'll try to give you guys as much heads up on that as we can, just so you're ready for it. So just wanted to share that. I think that'll pretty much wrap it up for the episode. Is there anything else that you'd want to add, Aaron, whether it be about your awesome mail day, the underrated cards, or the 0304 pristine box?
It's going to be super fun. It's going to be like, that product is really nice. I know how much you enjoy it. And so it's going to be fun seeing all these years later what you end up getting. So that I can't wait for that.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. So I think that'll pretty much wrap it up for episode 53. This was, again, like we said, a little bit of a change of pace, but definitely something fun for sure. And, hopefully, like I said, we can do things like this every now and again, just to change it up, keep things fresh, and, talk about things that maybe we wouldn't talk about, on a regular basis. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, let us know so that we know that you guys enjoyed it, and we'll keep doing it in the future, like I said. And of course, like Aaron said, let us know your stories about underrated cards that you have or that you know about, or whatever it might be. Like I said, as I was going through this, preparing for this episode, I just had a lot of fun doing it, learning about cards that I have that, I didn't know a fact about it in this regard or something. It's just really cool. So would definitely love to hear what you guys have to say about the topic too. And I'm sure that you guys can teach us a thing or two in the process as well. So definitely reach out with those fun and cool cards and stories. We always love hearing that stuff. So please be sure to do that. Also, please be sure to follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Sunrise Cardcast, and on Twitter at CICC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Sunrise Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.